what we look for most is impact in your previous experience. And I think that is the biggest gap I've seen in resumes, and the gap that gets people kind of filtered into the reject pile versus the accept pile is you need to be able to succinctly communicate the impact you delivered at your previous roles.
So today I have the honor of speaking with Chris Tung. Chris is currently head of Product CRM, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute, for devices and services at Google. He's in charge of lifecycle marketing strategy. We'll also talk about what that means for Google Nest, Pixel, and new products that launch in over 14 countries. So pretty big, lot of responsibility there. He's also started several companies on the side. One is called Coffee Chats, which makes it really easy for people to find and schedule time with coaches. Coaches can set up a landing page. They make it really easy for people to schedule time with them and even charge for that time. And over 1,000 of those chats have happened on Chris's platform since he started, which is pretty amazing because it's not that old. He also recently started Nerdcrawler. Nerdcrawler alerts people when new comic art drops from artists and dealers so that you don't need to go and spend time refreshing all of those various places where that art drops. And if you're in the comic art collecting, timing is everything. Like you want to be there when those things drop. And so this makes it really easy for people to get alerted when new art drops, which is awesome. He's also started a company called Reporty, which made it really easy to get notifications in Slack when somebody bought something on Shopify, and he sold that business. He started a company called Threadbase, which made it really easy to build your own Reddit-style website without writing any code. He got it to profitability, also sold that business. And before doing all this and working at Google, Chris worked at a company called Depict. There he marketed digital picture frames, for maybe lack of a better descriptor, that made art more discoverable. Before that, he worked at Imager. That is how it's pronounced, Imager. And that's where I got to work with Chris. Before that, he worked at Bonobos. He worked at Amazon. Did some time at Marvel Entertainment. So Chris has had this amazing career. And one of the things that I've always loved about Chris is how much he cares about helping other people in their careers. And that was sort of the inspiration for Coffee Chats, and we'll learn more about that as we get into the conversation. If you follow him on Twitter, you'll find that he not only shares very openly everything he's learning about building businesses, but he's also really generous in sharing tips on how to get jobs and how to manage your career. And that's because Chris has been on both sides. He's landed the jobs at the companies like Google and Amazon that are notorious for being pretty hard places to land jobs. He's also done the hiring at those places. And so he's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to how candidates handle the interview process, the entire hiring process. And that's what we want to talk about today, is how can you be a better interview candidate from the perspective of a hiring manager or someone who's landed jobs at Amazon and Google, what to do, not to do, not just to those places, but really this is advice that you can probably apply anywhere you're interviewing, whether that's interviewing this week or if you're planning to be interviewing in the coming months or even years. How can you be the best possible candidate? That's what we want to talk about today. So Chris, once again, thanks so much for being here. It's awesome to see you and have you here.
Thank you so much. I feel like I need to just have you follow me around and be my hype man, because that was an awesome intro, so I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, we'll see if I'll follow your advice on how to interview to work for you, yes. And we'll see if I get that job. Chief
Officer.
Yeah, I like it. Well, cool. Well, Chris, maybe we could start off with some just really basic stuff. What does a head of product CRM at Google actually do? Yeah,
and I'll touch on the life cycle a bit too. So the CRM team on devices and services is inclusive of, well, let's take a step back. Google is a very big company. We have things like ads, we have things like search, we have things like cloud, and then we have things like devices and services. So the devices are the things that you could probably find on the Google Store or at Target or Best Buy, things like a Nest camera, a Pixel phone, a Nest Hub. And then the services are things like Google One, Google Fi, Nest Aware, if you have one of our security cameras to kind of monitor your home to help you feel safe. And so that's devices and services. And then under that org is where I sit on the marketing side. And so the devices and services CRM team, or customer relationship management team, is focused on driving retention and customer engagement from the Google Store. So that's one CRM team. And then my team, the Product CRM team, is about driving retention from existing device owners who own one of the devices. So as Steve, you mentioned earlier, if you are a Pixel customer and you activate your phone and opt in for email, that is, you're part of my audience, and I can talk with you about new features, how your phone is getting better, or potentially recommend you devices or services that take your Pixel further and that deliver more value for you. And similarly on the Nest side, that's my audience as well. So if you activate a Nest Hub and want to learn more about it, those are all the communications that come through from my team. And so when we think about life cycle strategy, it is not only the I bought it and I activated it, and now I should get probably a welcome email to let you know, hey, we appreciate you joining the family, and here's some information on your device. Things like onboarding emails, like, oh, here are some services that you get as a free trial because you bought a Pixel phone. Things like, hey, here are some exclusive offers that you get because you're part of the ecosystem, and we think you might like a $10 off coupon to buy some Pixel Buds or a Pixel case. And then also later in the life cycle, things like, hey, it's a really good time to upgrade your phone, or hey, it's a seasonally relevant time. We want to let you know about Black Friday and Cyber Monday and deals like that. And so when we think about life cycle strategy, it is not just Steve has entered the flow and here are the linear emails that he will get over the course of a 12-month period. It is, what are the moments in time that we can talk with Steve to deliver as much help and value as possible? So in the beginning, it's help through welcome and getting set up and all that kind of stuff. But later, it might be things like, hey, your device is getting better through Google's amazing software innovations. We want to let you know about that. Or Steve might be at a point where he's debating about upgrading a phone. And so we want to let him know about the newest Pixel phone or the newest Nest Hub features and things like that. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. I learned a ton. I learned a ton about lifecycle marketing. I thought I knew a lot, but I just learned quite a few new things here. So, and hopefully everybody listening learned a bunch too. So Chris, you, what I heard there is you look after a team, but then you also partner with lots of other teams. And so you're typically involved in the building of those teams, right? Whether it's interviewing people that you're hiring for yourself or participating in the interview loops. We'll talk about what that is for other teams. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So Google has a very large workforce, but also a very large number of applicants. And so part of the responsibility is to, one, advocate for the team that you have and make the resource asks so that you can get funded and get that headcount approved to then go to a recruiter and say, we're ready to hire for this role. Part of that role is to clearly outline the roles and responsibilities, then interviewing candidates, case studies, if any, and then being part of other hiring managers' loops for their other candidates as well. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And if you were to take a guess at how many people you think you've interviewed over the course of your career, where would you peg that number?
It's probably in the low 100, maybe more like. Yeah, I think something like that. Whether it's a combination of phone screens, multiple rounds, things like that, but definitely have seen a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about the process. If someone wanted to come and work for you, on your team at Google or other teams at Google, what does the application process typically look like? What does the hiring process look like? Let's say somebody submits an application. What typically happens next?
Yeah. So great place to apply is careers.google.com. That has an exhaustive list of all of our roles. And then from that, it would be a phone screen with likely a recruiter just to evaluate the candidate based off of the resume that they receive. Then there is usually a phone screen with the hiring manager. And then from there, let's assume the happy path and things go great at each round. So hiring manager phone screen goes well. Then there is a somewhat of a panel interview. You won't necessarily interview all of the people at the same time, but it would be anywhere from 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 individuals who will then chat with you about specific criteria that Google is looking for. And when I was at Amazon, it was a very similar model of there are guiding principles at Amazon that each of the interviewers are trying to evaluate against. At Google, we have kind of 4 key pillars for hiring that we're looking for: role-related knowledge, general cognitive ability, leadership, and Googliness. So each of the individual panel members will be asking questions related to those things. And then assuming that goes well, you may have any other follow-on conversations with the manager. But assuming it goes well, you then likely go to hiring committee, which is like the final round that a packet is assembled and your candidacy is evaluated. And assuming that goes well, then there's comp committee, and then you get the offer. And that experience is very much what I went through. I had one extra round, actually, after the panel, where now I know definitively that I actually bombed one of my interviews with my hiring manager, and we had a follow-on conversation. And I think I'm happy to chat with you all about that, because there's a lot of experience in that moment of like, how do you close what is actually a no into a yes? Or how do you turn that into a yes? But that was my experience, and that's been the experience for the people that I've hired as well.
All right, I definitely want to come back to that, because that sounds like a fascinating story. Curious, up front you mentioned, so someone applies through careers. I think you said
careers.google.com.
Got it. And then you mentioned, and then you'll have a phone call, but not necessarily 100% of the time. Just because you apply, not everybody will get a call with a recruiter. Is that right?
Oh no, this is the happy ideal path. Like you're going to get the role. Sadly, just due to the nature of the roles that we have and the number of applicants, yes, many applicants will kind of be screened out, not meeting the qualifications of the role or the years of experience. That will happen to many applicants.
Yeah. Any suggestions on, so when that application is submitted, anything that automatically flunks an application, or like just don't do this on your application, or always do this because this is only going to increase the chances that your application will make it to that you're going to get a phone call from a recruiter?
Yeah, it's absolutes are always challenging, and it's hard to know. But what I can tell you, and it's what I tell everyone, is what we look for most is impact in your previous experience. And I think that is the biggest gap I've seen in resumes, and the gap that gets people kind of filtered into the reject pile versus the accept pile is you need to be able to succinctly communicate the impact you delivered at your previous roles. So what do I mean by that? Don't say things like, worked on social media, period, end of bullet point. Yeah. It is like, give me what you did, worked on social media, how you did it, parentheses, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then the impact, resulting in a 50% increase in followers, a 20% in social media attributed revenue, maybe any awards or recognitions that you may have gotten, but you need to be able to tell me the impact. And oftentimes that is through a quantifiable metric, which, Steve, you were my previous manager. You really trained this stuff into me. It's like measurement, right? Like, don't just send emails. Like, the emails did what? Did they have a strong open rate? If they did have a strong open rate, what was it? And what does that compare to? What is the benchmark, right? Being able to do that kind of thinking moves you from the no to, I would like to talk with this person to learn more. So that impact, please just tell me the impact.
Yeah. It's probably better to have a shorter list of 2 or 3 impact related bullet points than 10 bullets that might describe the actions or the activities that you may have done, but there's no clear outcome of those activities, right?
100%.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So pointer number 1 there, focus on describing your results, the results of the work you did. And I thought that format you had there, this is what I did and this is what happened as results, is a really good kind of syntax to use. Got it. Okay. And so that someone does a great job on their application, they list out their results. Doesn't mean that 100% of the time they're going to get the call, but let's say they do. So they have that call with, I think you mentioned the first call is typically with a recruiter. Is that right? Yep. And that person, what is that person typically looking for, and any advice you can share on how to help make sure that first call goes really well?
Yeah. So I can kind of give it from the lens of when I applied, and then now on the other side of it. I think the common thread is they're looking for you to validate that initial feeling of, I need to jump on the phone with this person. So the recruiter will flag the resume as, this meets the minimum qualifications of the role. And so at Google, for example, we'll list things like, in my world, 3 years of CRM or email marketing experience, right? Proven track record of delivering results through email and maybe understanding of certain email specific things like canned spam law or whatever, right? The resume clearly indicated that. They used an impact-led framework that has all those bullet points out. So now the recruiter is going to jump on the phone and just verify this stuff. Can you tell me more about your email marketing experience, right? So being able to then say things like, yep, I have 8 years of email marketing experience, check, meets the 3-year qualification. In that time, I led global emails, and so very familiar with the nuances of sending email marketing to United States and Canada or UK. Cool, check. You understand canned spam law and things like that. That's what they're trying to do. And then I think the next bit is, and oftentimes how Google questions are framed as a hypothetical or behavioral, which is behavioral, tell me about a time. So, right, tell me about your email marketing experience, tell me about a time you did email. And then maybe they might ask like a hypothetical question of like, okay, well, imagine if you had to, and actually this is a similar structure to my recruiting call at Facebook, which I did not get. I did not go to the next round. But the question was, the hypothetical from Facebook was, how might you do CRM and email marketing for Instagram at the time, right? And Google might ask a similar question. How might you do email marketing for a Nest Hub, right? The recruiter's job is just to see, do you meet the minimum qualifications, and such that the recruiter will say, let me send this now over to the hiring manager and confirm that this candidate is worth talking to, right? I think what you'll find is job application process is very much like a marketing funnel. For those not familiar, marketing funnel, right? There's consideration, there's intent, then there's like you land on the page to do the action. So for example, Amazon, you land on Amazon.com, you find the product, you add the product to your cart, you check out, right? Job application is very similar. You apply for a job, perhaps an automated system is filtering through resumes, then a recruiter talks with you, then the hiring manager. And so it gets progressively leaner. So the recruiter's talking with the most people, then the hiring manager is talking with the second most, and then it gets shorter and shorter until ultimately you have like one candidate and that they get the job.
One of the things you mentioned there is that recruiter is looking for, does this person have the qualifications that are listed on the job listing, basically, right? So if there are a set of requirements, they're there for a reason. The hiring manager and the hiring team, they need somebody with those specific experiences and skills, and the recruiter is trying to verify this person has those skills, right? So it would seem like one really good way to prepare for that first interview is go down that list of those requirements that are listed and have an answer for how you can verify that you have those skills, right? And ideally have some stories that bring that to life, right? So if one of the requirements is, yes, this person needs to understand canned spam laws for sending email, have a story around how you were able to, make sure that you did the right things according to that type of regulation, and you can speak about it with the recruiter. It makes it a lot easier for the recruiter to then sell the candidate to probably the next person in the process. Is that the hiring manager usually?
That's correct. And I think, Steve, your point is 100% right, which is the recruiter may not have all of the context or domain expertise, like subject matter expertise of the hiring manager or the people on the panel. Their job, though, is to say, these were the qualifications that we approved as a unit when listing the job. Let me just make sure they all check the box. The level of detail at that phone screen doesn't need to be the deepest, but I think that's where storytelling is most important, and using things like, this was the context of the ask or the project, this is what I did, this is how I did it, this is the impact, 4 sentences, pretty good, probably 3-minute answer, 3 to 5 minutes, plus room for follow-up. That's the important part of that round. Then you'll dive deeper on subject matter expertise with the hiring manager or with the panel, because these are people then who are much more familiar with the role.
Got it. And so that recruiter is trying to convince the hiring manager, here's why you should talk to this candidate. Is that basically kind of what's happening there? And so the more you can arm the recruiter with stories that they can share with the hiring manager, they said they did this thing, they shared the story about this, it's going to make it a lot easier for that hiring manager to decide whether it's worth their time to have the conversation, right? Because hiring managers are really busy. They have day jobs. They have other things they have to do, right? In addition to recruiting and team building, super important, but they have budgets to manage and teams to lead and initiatives to lead, right? And so hiring is just one of many things. And so for the hiring manager, it's some calculus around like, is this good time? Is this time well spent to talk to this candidate based on what I'm hearing from the recruiter? Is that a fair interpretation of what you're sharing?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very accurate. I think for those familiar with like finding an apartment in New York City or buying a house anywhere, it's like the mortgage broker or the real estate broker, right? They're looking at more houses, and then you as the potential buyer is just trying to look at the most likely homes that make sense for me. And I think for the hiring manager, it's the same thing. They're looking at who are the most likely candidates. And so you have a recruiter to kind of help do some of that work, upper funnel, to then manage the time of the down funnel folks.
Got it. And then if that goes really well with the recruiter and the hiring manager decides, yes, this sounds right, is that the next step typically, that the candidate would then meet the hiring manager?
Yeah, that's how it was for me, and that's how it was for the people that I've hired. Yeah, I have seen someone do exceptionally well, and they just move straight to the panel. If they feel like a candidate is particularly strong, then the panel will include the hiring manager, and then that is the loop. So, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Any suggestions on, let's say there's the path where someone is going to meet the hiring manager separately from the loop. Any advice on how people should prepare for that any differently than the way they prepared? One thing you mentioned is having a bit more depth in your answers, right, than maybe you did for the recruiter. Anything else that is good advice for someone to know before they meet with a hiring manager?
Yeah, I feel like in the 30-minute interview structure is very common. And so I like to just time block each thing. What you'll find is the first 2 minutes are the like waiting for someone to join. Hey, you're on mute. Things like that. How are you doing? How's the weather? The back 2 minutes is, do you have any questions for me? So you're really working with about 26 minutes of time. And so a hiring manager will often say things like, walk me through your resume, or one I really liked from a peer was, walk me through your resume and highlight any projects that are relevant to this job. So I think the first bit in that question is pay very close attention to how they ask that question, because if they ask things like your experience relevant to this job, please don't tell me like where you went to high school or whatever, because your answer can get quite long. Focus on impact and how your experience and the impact you've already driven makes sense to the role you're applying. And that answer is likely, like, if you can get that down to like 5 minutes or less, right? It's just, again, using time block. Now you have like 21 to 20 minutes of remaining content, right? For the follow-on questions. And so, one mistake I have seen is that tell me about yourself. The candidate continued to talk for a long time. And I think one thing hiring managers can do is just wait for you to finish. And so if you're someone like me who needs to fill silence with words, train yourself not to do that. You need to be able to find conversational off-ramps and just say, period, end of thing. Please, next question, right? That's important. So then in the next 20 minutes, at least in my experience, we've given like a pretty more in-depth hypothetical. So how might you manage the launch of a new product, right, through email marketing, right? And we're looking for the much deeper things. So if you're familiar with like a creative brief, walk me through that. If you're familiar with coding emails, share some of that experience. If you're familiar with pulling reports and driving insights and strategy, walk me through that. I think the challenge is to hit on all the most important bits in a succinct amount of time to leave questions for follow-ups. It's every hiring manager interview will be different, but I certainly think the main call out is you need to show that you know what you're talking about, right? That's where like they'll start to sniff out, like, is the candidate's experience truly what they say they are, and is it a match for what we're looking for?
And you touched on something really important there, which is managing the clock, right?
Yes.
And to your point, like, you don't have a lot of time there. You're bookended. You're losing a few minutes at the front with small talk. You're going to lose a few at the back with questions, which we should talk about that. But that middle part, be really mindful of how long you're spending on each answer. I have bumped into that a lot, where a candidate went on and on and on about, with one answer to one question. And I thought, wow, I hope that is what you believe is the most important thing for me to take away from this conversation, because we don't have time to talk about anything else now. And so, think about in priority, like, what are the things I think this manager should know about what I've done and how that relates to what they're looking for? And am I spending the right amount of time? Am I budgeting my time appropriately to get those points across? Because you probably won't get a second chance if you don't do that well on your first conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Manage the clock. Okay. And so let's say then that goes really well. Someone managed their clock. Those questions, you said 2 minutes, roughly 2 questions, or 2 minutes for questions for you. How should people be thinking about those questions and using that time?
Yeah. Certainly don't say I have no questions.
Okay.
I think it is. I mean, I've had that happen, and the candidate did a phenomenal job, and we were very exhausted, and we ended up having like 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So we were like, well, I'll talk with you soon anyway. But if you do have the time, again, like you said, Steve, you might not get this opportunity again, so you really want to use it and shine. One question I've gotten recently that I've enjoyed is there anything about this interview that gives you any pause about my application? I thought that was a really thoughtful question, and it allowed me to actually ask some questions or clarifying questions that maybe the candidate didn't shine as well on. But it also was a way, if the candidate was doing well, for me to just kind of reiterate, like, I think I have everything. I think I'm all set. So I thought that was a really good question that I've gotten recently. I think other things like the standard stuff, right? Like day-to-day responsibilities, company culture. Depending on where you are in your career, the interview might be a way for you to, like, early on in my career, I just needed a job. It's like I just desperately need a job. So my questions were very much rooted in, like, how do I kind of get my way to saying I'm the best candidate? So I'm going to ask a question and just say, like, yep, I agree, and I can do that. Later on in your career, part of it is sussing out, is this a place I want to work, right? Are these the people I want to work with? And so then those questions change to, like, what is work-life balance like here? What do you all, are there any, in a remote environment, what is the company's thoughts on team offsites or getting together, right? If that is of value to you. So later, everyone's context is different. In the beginning of my career, it was, what can I do to just get a job? Now in my career, it's, how can I use this time to learn more about the company if I'm going to make a big change?
Got it. Okay. And then, so things go really well. They answer your questions. They run their clock. They manage their clock really well. Next step is typically the interview panel. We call it a panel or committee, one of the two. But it's a number of people. And you said there were 4 things that panel is typically looking for, right?
Yes. So, and I think this is all Googleable, but it's role-related knowledge, general cognitive ability, leadership, and Googliness. Those are the 4 things. At Amazon, we had the guiding principles, which I've forgotten them, but I think you kind of pick 2. Each candidate or panel member does 2 of them, and you ask questions related to them. And so let me just dive into what those are. So role-related knowledge. If you are applying for a channel marketing role, like I am in CRM, that's really where you're going to get the questions like email marketing, open rates, things like that. If it's social media, again, like experience with various social media channels. If it's like ATL marketing or above the line, so have you done branded campaigns, billboards, whatever, right? Then general cognitive ability, that is really about like critical thinking. It's frowned upon now. We are told not to ask questions like how many golf balls fit in Empire State Building. I know that's probably Googleable, and you can see that. I don't ask those questions. We're told not to, and I think they're not valuable. I think it's more these like hypothetical, like how might you work through like working with a product manager on this project, right? And then giving them roadblocks and seeing how they handle those. Leadership. So the expectation is we want you to grow at Google, right? So over time, we want you to be able to manage a team or things like that. And also just working and influencing stakeholders and things like that as well as part of leadership. So those are those kinds of questions. And lastly, Googliness. That is the kind of how do you work, how do you work through stressful situations? Tell me about a time you went above and beyond, like those kinds of things where I know there's an official definition and I'm going to butcher it. But I think for me, that bit is the kind of how do you given a world where like we're working with humans, right? And even if you're an engineer, you're still going to work with humans. What is your like emotional quotient range, right? Such that can you empathize with your peers and help them in such a way that leads to better team culture, right? That's kind of the space of Googling this. Yeah.
Got it. So it sounds like a lot of that is around, trying to see like how good of a teammate are you going to be outside of your skills for the role we need and your past experiences. What is it going to be like to work together as a team? Because you will work with multiple people in different departments and across, in different functional areas, and being able to work well with others. That's how great work gets done typically, right? So it sounds like that's kind of what the heart of that is, right? What's it going to be like for us to work with you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we say we're not looking for culture fits, we're looking for culture adds, right? And so we don't want a homogenous group of people. We want people who will add and improve the company. And so I think that is part of it as well. Yeah.
Chris, any advice on what people should be doing in between these steps? We've talked about a few of them, right? There's the application, there's the recruiter conversation, there's the hiring manager conversation, there's the panel, which that may not all happen on the same day, right? Those meetings may be scheduled across several days. What should candidates be doing in between? Any suggestions on like good follow-up, or follow-up that really stands out, or follow-up that like maybe stands out for the wrong reasons?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in that follow-up email sent roughly 24 hours after the interview. From my own personal experience, that email got me my first job. My first job, I did not do well on a specific question, and I sent a follow-up email to that interviewer, providing a better answer. And then later on, when I got the role and we caught up, he was like, "Oh, had you not sent that email, you would have been a no for me." So I can definitively say that those emails can save you and turn those no's into a yes. I think you want to be thoughtful about them. If you can find a narrative tether from your interview to the email, that's really helpful. A specific thing that was brought up that you want to touch on, or even just a common interest. I think one time I interviewed with somebody and he had a watch that I also had. And so I mentioned that in my follow-up interview, right? It's just something to humanize the experience a bit more and let them know you appreciated their time. Because again, like you said, everyone is busy. What I do know from a lot of my engineering friends, if you're applying at Google, they continue to practice with leak code. So coding exercises and things like that. I think for those of us in the world of marketing, you mentioned the word story earlier. I think that one word is incredibly important. What are your stories that you are going to bring to this interview that demonstrates your abilities, your intelligence, your persuasiveness, your leadership, etc.? Get your stories really tight. I think everybody can tell better stories depending on the audience, and so understanding what level of detail do you need your story to hit, I think is a way to practice too. And tell them to other people. Talk to your friends and say, "Hey, let me tell you this story about a project I worked on. Did they get the takeaway that you wanted? Or did they go, oh, I got lost after 3 minutes?" These are the things to practice, I would say.
So use your stories in your follow-up. So number one, follow-up. Send the email afterwards. Send it within 24 hours. I'm still shocked at how many people don't do that.
That's right.
So those who do, stand out. You already have an advantage over a lot of the other candidates. Even better is in that email, you include some story, something relevant from the conversation that shows, hey, this wasn't just a copy and paste email that I sent to everybody. I took a couple minutes just to share something that was unique about the conversation we had, because I know you're having a lot of other conversations with other candidates, and this is a great way for me to stand out a little bit, right, against those other conversations, and do that with the other interview panels as well. You mentioned that in your case, that follow-up note actually turned what may have been not getting the job into getting the job. You had also referenced earlier in the conversation, you had learned that there was another job that maybe the same one that you weren't going to get, and you did something that did get you the job. Was that the one?
No, this is the second one. So my first ever job was when the email helped. And then the Google job, I was actually I think we use like expression like leaning no higher. So there's like no higher, no strongly no higher, leaning no higher, leaning higher, higher, strongly higher. And I think I was a leaning higher or leaning no higher. And the hiring manager wanted to talk because she was like, you did well with everybody else, but you didn't do well on this presentation bit. And we talked, and basically the root of it was she wanted to see how well I took feedback. And that was the googliness bit too, is you are not going to always be a rock star. You will fail. You will have egg on your face. How do you take feedback and grow from that? And in that moment, when she asked, like, how'd you think that went? And I was like, well, I was bad. You know, I was in my head. I was presenting to you, but then I was trying to also give you the context of why I made this slide a specific way, which one was muddying the story. And we ended that 30-minute interview, and, you know, fast forward 3 years later now, and I'm at Ben Google and all that. But I've talked with her about it, and she said the most important thing I was trying to figure out was how well do you take feedback to kind of meet that googliness bar. And she said, I can teach you how to present better, but I can't. It's much harder to teach somebody how to take feedback well. And so from that experience, I got the job. And wow. So
that's awesome. That, your humility, Chris, it's so refreshing to hear. Like, you've been really open about two possible mistakes, but little things you did that helped turn around what could have been, not a great outcome for one that was a whole lot better. And I think we all can use that type of advice, right? Like, it's never over until it's over. And there are ways to pull something back. And you've demonstrated a couple of those. We also talk about kind of feedback and getting feedback from others. Coffee Chats was sort of built with that idea, right? Like, maybe we could talk a little bit. We can close out here, talk a little bit about Coffee Chats and what made you decide to build it, how people should think about it today, and what else they should know about what you built.
Yeah. So Coffee Chats, the website is trycoffeechats.com. It was built because of the pandemic. May 2020, I was seeing people getting laid off and sharing their stories, and I just felt like I could do more. And so I spun up a way for people to book time on my calendar to have informal coffee chats, and then a call to action on the bottom that said, if you are interested, please add your email. I got a bunch of emails, and I think I got 27 bookings or something within 24 hours of launching the product. And some of those coffee chatters have gone on to get jobs at Google and Shopify and Facebook, and I'm just so thrilled and happy for them. And so then it was like, let's chase that feeling, right? Let's help more people. I think as a child of immigrants, I didn't have exposure to a lot of like, what's at an Ivy League school? What is all of these amazing things that people get access to when they're quite affluent? And so now I'm in a position, I recognize my privilege. Like, I've worked at Amazon, I've worked at Google. People want to hear these stories. And so I try to make myself as available as possible so that that information isn't guarded behind expensive gates and stuff. And so that's really where Coffee Chats came from. And now it's evolved into a platform that lets anyone launch their own coaching business or Coffee Chats business. And it's been really great just to see, like, one of our coworkers, I'll give him a shout out, Dan Liu, who is a great product manager. He's one of my better users on Coffee Chats, and he uses the platform to help people break into product. A bunch of other coworkers that we've worked with, Steve, have also used the platform to help others. And I think what you find is, yes, there's a lot of sadness and dark stuff in this world, but I think most people are eager to help, and they want to help, and they want to give back. I firmly believe that. And so I think Coffee Chats is just a way to make that easier in a sense, because I think the other thing too is Googling or searching for information is hard. I remember actually, Steve, I think we talked about this. It's like the kind of like white space problem of, hey, you can ask me anything. People freeze and don't know what to ask. And so then if you kind of structure it in such a way where it's like, well, we'll talk like this, like what you and I are doing, and it's in the context of this coffee chat format, I think you find people are much more open and able to express themselves. And then in doing so, human relationships are formed, and the world is better because of that. So yeah, making the world, I guess, making the world better one coffee chat at a time, I think is sometimes what I say.
I love that. Yeah, that's the mission. I saw that. And so people can go to trycoffeechats.com and they can find people who are willing to carve out time to help them, right? And right now with what's going on, in the job climate, a lot of people might need a whole lot of advice. And so if you're someone willing to give it, go check out trycoffeechats.com and set up a page. And then if you're someone who's looking for some time and advice, I think they can also find that there as well. Right, Chris?
That's correct. Yeah, there is the Discover page, which has a bunch of people available. And if you want to book time with me, it's chris.trycoffeechats.com. Some of my chats, like resume reviews and things like that, are paid chats, but 100% of the funds right now will be donated to Planned Parenthood. And so if you would like to get resume advice and simultaneously make a donation, you can do that all at the same time by going to chris.trycoffeechats.com and booking time with me.
That is, like I mentioned at the top, Chris has always been unbelievably generous with helping people move their careers forward. And be able to close it out on that note is pretty awesome. So, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your time and your experiences and your advice. I learned a ton. I bet everybody listening has also learned a ton. For folks listening, if you found this valuable, leave some comments below. Or if you have questions for me or for Chris, if there's anything you'd like us to follow up on, leave comments below. If you wouldn't mind, hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps the channel. And when you see that little bell pop up, you hit that, you'll get notified when we share more content like this. So, Chris, thanks so much for the time. It's awesome catching up with you, and I can't wait to do it again. And I'm going to go book a coffee chat right now, I think.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Steve. This is a great platform, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. Best of luck. And I'm here if you or anyone else needs anything.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. Bye.